You knew it was a bad idea before it left your mouth. Some part of you saw it coming even as the words were already forming, and then you said it anyway. If you have ever wondered what was actually happening inside your head in that exact moment, the moment right before you said the thing you would spend the next hour or the next year wishing you could take back, this video is for you. Almost everyone has had this experience, and almost everyone feels genuinely ashamed of it afterward, as though saying something regrettable in a heated moment is proof of a character flaw, a lack of self-control, or simply being a worse person than they would like to believe they are. This shame is understandable, but it is based on a significant misunderstanding of what is actually happening in the brain during those seconds. What happens right before a regrettable outburst is not a failure of character. It is a specific, well-documented, and almost entirely automatic neurological sequence, one that happens to nearly every human brain under the right conditions, regardless of how kind, thoughtful, or self-controlled that person is the rest of the time. Understanding this sequence does not excuse harmful words. But it does explain, with genuine scientific precision, exactly why in-the-moment self-control can fail so completely, even in people who are normally extremely good at managing themselves. It is worth pointing out that this is precisely why the same person can behave completely differently depending on the situation, calm and measured in a professional meeting, and then say something sharp and regrettable within seconds during an argument with someone they love. This is not hypocrisy or inconsistency of character. It reflects the fact that this neurological sequence is triggered by specific conditions, closeness, history, perceived stakes, rather than by a fixed personal trait that would show up identically in every situation a person finds themselves in. And the very first thing to understand is something that happens faster than conscious thought is even capable of moving. Deep in the brain sits a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala, which is responsible for detecting threat and triggering an emotional response. Critically, the amygdala receives sensory information through a fast, direct pathway that bypasses the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, impulse control, and considered judgment, entirely. This means that in a moment of perceived threat, whether that threat is physical danger or simply the sting of feeling disrespected, criticized, or dismissed, the amygdala can trigger a full emotional and physiological response before the thinking, reasoning part of the brain has even finished processing what happened. The angry words that arrive almost instantly, seemingly before any real thought occurred, genuinely did occur before much conscious thought was possible. The brain's alarm system moved first because it evolved to move first in situations where a delay could once have meant real danger. Under normal circumstances, the prefrontal cortex acts as a kind of brake pedal on the amygdala's more impulsive reactions, evaluating a situation, weighing consequences, and moderating a response before it becomes action. This is the part of the brain responsible for the pause between feeling angry and choosing what, if anything, to actually say. But under a sufficiently intense emotional surge, the amygdala's activation can genuinely and measurably reduce the prefrontal cortex's ability to function effectively. Blood flow and neural activity shift in ways that temporarily favor rapid emotional reaction over slow, considered reasoning. This is sometimes described as the brain's brake pedal being disabled at exactly the moment it is needed most. It is not that the person chose not to think before speaking. It is that the part of the brain responsible for that kind of thinking was, for a brief window, operating at significantly reduced capacity. And this next part explains why the words that come out in these moments often feel like they arrived from somewhere else entirely. The moment the amygdala perceives a threat, it triggers a rapid cascade of stress hormones, primarily adrenaline and cortisol, released into the bloodstream in a fraction of a second. This is the same physiological response responsible for a racing heart, tightened muscles, and heightened alertness in any high-stakes situation, the body preparing rapidly for action. This chemical flood does not stay contained to the body. It directly affects brain function, narrowing attention toward the perceived threat and away from broader context, nuance, or long-term consequence. This is precisely why in the middle of a heated exchange it can feel almost impossible to consider how a comment might land, or to remember things that would normally matter deeply, like a person's feelings or the state of a relationship. The chemistry of the moment is actively narrowing the field of what the brain is even capable of considering, for as long as that hormonal surge remains active. One of the most important things to understand about this entire sequence is that the amygdala is not a particularly sophisticated judge of what actually constitutes danger. It is fast, but it is not precise. It responds to patterns that resemble past threats, a certain tone of voice, a particular kind of criticism, a feeling of being cornered or disrespected, often without fully distinguishing between genuine danger and something that merely resembles an old, unresolved pain point. This means the intensity of a reaction in the moment often has very little to do with the actual size of the present situation, and a great deal to do with how closely it resembles something the amygdala has flagged as significant in the past. A comment that seems, from the outside, relatively minor, can trigger a response completely disproportionate to it, not because the person reacting is being unreasonable, but because their amygdala is responding to a pattern match with something considerably larger from earlier in their life. Here is the genuinely useful part of all of this. The entire sequence described so far, amygdala activation, prefrontal cortex suppression, hormonal flooding, takes a matter of seconds to fully engage, but it does not happen instantaneously in a way that leaves absolutely no room for intervention. There's a narrow window, right at the very beginning of the surge, where a well-practiced pause can genuinely interrupt the sequence before it reaches full force. This is not about willpower in the moment, because willpower is precisely the resource being temporarily reduced. It is about pre-built habits, a physical pause, a single deep breath, a rehearsed phrase like "I need a moment" that can be triggered almost automatically before the full hormonal cascade has taken hold. These techniques work not because they involve heroic self-control in the heat of the moment, but because they are practiced so many times in calm moments that they become nearly automatic themselves, capable of engaging even when the thinking brain is significantly compromised. Many people were raised in households where this entire neurological sequence was completely misunderstood, treated instead as a simple matter of character. Either you had self-control or you did not. Either you were a calm person or a hot-tempered one, with very little room for the actual biology involved. This framework left very few people equipped with practical tools for interrupting the sequence, because the sequence itself was never explained as something biological and interruptible, rather than something purely moral. Understanding the actual neuroscience does not remove personal responsibility for words spoken in anger, but it does replace shame, which tends to make the pattern worse, with genuine understanding, which is one of the few things reliably shown to make it better. And before we finish, the one thing I most want you to take from everything in this video. The seconds before saying something you regret are not a referendum on your character. They are a specific, well-documented neurological sequence that happens in every human brain under the right conditions, and understanding this does not excuse harmful words, but it does offer something more useful than shame, a genuine, practical path toward interrupting the sequence before it fully takes hold. This week, try one small thing. Choose a single phrase in advance, "I need a minute," and practice saying it out loud right now in a completely calm moment until it feels natural. That single rehearsed phrase, built in advance rather than invented in the heat of the moment, is one of the most effective tools available for interrupting this sequence before the words that follow are ones you will spend the next hour wishing you could take back. If someone you know struggles with this same pattern, share this with them today. Understanding the biology behind it is often the first real step toward changing it. Take care of yourself, and we will see you next time.